We've got some breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ where the U.S. women's national team is advancing to the semifinals of the Tokyo Games after a thrilling penalty shootout result over the Netherlands. This was a rematch of the 2019 World Cup final, and Team USA moves on after a 2-2 result going into extras and penalties. And joining us now is Aly Wagner, a soccer analyst and two-time gold medal winner. Aly, we can start many different ways here, but where would you like to begin the conversation?
I'd like to breathe. I mean, that was maybe one of the most stressful games I've ever seen this U.S. team play because, first of all, they go down 1-0, and you're feeling like, oh no, this is the same U.S. team showing up, or that hasn't really showed up in the group stage. But then they battle back 1-1, they tie it up, and quickly get on the ascendancy, go on the front foot, get up 2-1. And now you're feeling a little bit more comfortable. But with Vivian Miedema on the pitch, I don't think you could ever be entirely comfortable. And of course, she's the one that found that tie goal, the equalizer for Netherlands that sent us to overtime. I think when you look at this match, one of the things that stands out is Lynn Williams picks up the assist and gets the goal for the United States. She's a player that barely played minutes in this tournament. She was an alternate and ultimately got the start against this Netherlands side. Really because of her pace. She was going up against Janssen, that player right there. Her job was to pin back Janssen, who likes to get forward, not allow Lika Martens, the attacking player that plays in front of her, who rotates into the interior to cause problems. So Lynn Williams really pinned them back, I think, in that first half and caused a lot of problems. So I do think you have to give credit to Vlaco for understanding that tactical matchup was going to be in the United States' favor, giving her the nod. So overall, I felt like the U.S. pressed well in that first half, but then in the second half, things they shifted, and the U.S. decided to sit back. They weren't trying to engage as higher on the field, and as soon as you're doing that against this Netherlands side that's so comfortable in possession, you knew they were going to create problems, and you started to see Janssen get forward on that left side, Lika Martens in the interior, and in fact, they started fading Miedema out wide. So now you've got the pace of initially Van de Sanden going against the center back pairing of Dahlkemper, Sauerbrunn, and then ultimately it was Berenstein who held up that position. And I do think that Miedema initially was finding space when she did pull wide, but ultimately I don't think that paid off for Netherlands. I thought she had a quiet second half and was actually more passive than I've seen her play. So that hurt the Netherlands. But I think that's why Vlaco ultimately made the subs he did, getting Lynn Williams off, bringing in Kristen Press, bringing Alex Morgan. With Kristen Press, you know you're going to get that defensive work rate like Lynn Williams. But if it was Lynn Williams that was marking Martens in the interior, I think the better matchup is with Press making those defensive recovery runs and 1v1 defensive abilities. So I know there's questions about subbing off a player that had an assist and had a goal, but I do think that it was the right defensive move for Vlaco Ananoski in that second half, but it was still too passive, for the United States in that second half. I think if they continued to press, they would have probably found that go-ahead goal, and we wouldn't have had to deal with overtime and penalties and make our heart rate race this early.
The Americans are all watching, of course, with penalties. A second one of the morning if you're up early to watch Canada and Brazil. And you mentioned some of the great points that Ananoski was able to do in terms of the substitutions. And it just so happens that Rose Lavelle, Alex Morgan, Kristen Press, and Megan Rapinoe, who all came in as subs, were the penalty shootout takers. What did you think of that, Aly?
You know, I thought it's a difficult role. Oftentimes you see coaches sub in players late in the overtime to get their PK takers on the field. And in this situation, they all had quality minutes. And so they were probably in the rhythm and more comfortable. So that really benefited them, I think, going into the penalty shootout. But I would say Rapinoe even though she had a few good services in that match, I thought she did not have a strong outing when she came in. Alex Morgan was quiet, Press, they just didn't. I go back to this confidence issue I have with this United States team, which is why I was actually nervous going into that penalty shootout, because these players still don't look like themselves, and their touches were running long. They weren't going and pressing and finding the game the way we're used to. Alex Morgan was just sitting off and not really getting the clean first touch to set herself up. So I still think there's questions to be had in this front three as we look forward, but you do have to give credit to those players coming in and getting the job done. No one will remember that they didn't have the cleanest of touches in the second half. They will remember that they stepped up in the shootout, were calm with their nerves, and eventually got this team onto the semifinal match.
You mentioned the front three. There were 5 changes to the starting 11 against Australia, against the Netherlands today. That is the trident up there with Rapinoe, Press, and Morgan, with Williams, Rand, and much there. What do you anticipate with Tobin Heath and Carly Lloyd for this game? What do you anticipate in the semifinals? Will we see what we saw today, or a mixture of both?
You know, I think the balance, because when we played this Canadian side in qualifiers for the Olympics, actually, Wojciechowski made a mistake and went with all pace and all power up top, and he didn't have a good variety. The players are of the same profile, so I think there is going to be a balance to that starting lineup. I don't think it's going to be a Morgan, Press, Lynn Williams type look. I think you might find Carly Lloyd back in. I thought her defensive work and press was really good in the first half. Again, just not a lot of offensive production coming out of her. I thought Heath had an okay performance, so I wouldn't be surprised to see her start again just because of the creativity that she can provide. But the matchup, I mean, on the right side of the United States against that left back for Canada, she's one of the best 1v1 defenders in the world. So I think that's going to be a fascinating one to watch. But the more interesting question for me comes at the center back partnership, because again, not a strong performance by Abby Dahlkemper. You're going up against Vivian Miedema. Literally, now I'm saying she is the best striker in the world from what I've seen from her today. And Dahlkemper did not have a strong game. So does he go back to that Davidson-Sauerbrunn pairing? I would like to see that happen. I think that's going to be important against Canada and the aerial presence that she has. And that was another thing today that was interesting with this team. I think he went with that aerial presence with Sam Ewis in midfield. I think they were looking to dominate the wide areas, which they did in the first half, not as much in the second. But the wide areas where we gained our advantage, and he was looking for our ability to get on the end of crosses. That's how we got our first goal with Sam Ewis. And I think we dominated first. We were winning the first ball. We were picking up the second in the first half. That didn't happen as much again in the second half because he subbed out Sam Ewis. You subbed out Lynn Williams, 2 players really strong in the air. So when you look at this Canada matchup, a lot of times there are going to be those aerial duels that the United States needs to get the advantage on. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does include maybe a Lynn Williams again, Sam Ewis back in the midfield, and use some of that rotation coming back into play.
All right, now I got one more before we let you go. Again, looking ahead to Canada in the semifinals. You talk about maybe changes here, changes there. I don't think there's going to be any change with Julie Ertz. When we talked about the announcement of this team, she was sort of a question mark coming back from injury. Would she be limited? She has been indispensable. And what have you seen from her, not only today, but the tournament, as she's been a key cog for the Americans here?
Key cog and most important player for this United States team, and that's been the case for a while. So thankfully, she did return from injury. And she hasn't slowed down. I mean, this is a player that came in. She didn't start in that opening match. She was still trying to buy some time to get back into form, going 120 minutes today. And you see it, the way she steps into the passing lanes she clogs up, the way she slides into that back line and fills the voids if the center backs are pulled out, whether they're stepping in midfield or whether they have to cover in those wide areas with their defenders. Her understanding of the game is incredible. I was watching that match going, you're seeing Vivian Miedema direct her team, and you're watching Julie Ertz tell the United States players where to be on the pitch and direct them into moments. Her understanding is what is maybe the most important piece to how she plays, but then add in her toughness, her ability to win those 1v1 duels, and then also her calmness. When she does win it, she's not perfect on the ball, no, but a lot of times she's making the right decision to just spray that ball wide and set up key players that are going to be in matchups that benefit the U.S. in those wide areas 1v1.
Aly, we can finally breathe for a little bit to the semifinals. Aly Wagner joining us here in CBS Sports HQ with Team USA moving on. Aly, certainly appreciate it. Let's take a look at the bracket. So it's going to be Canada with a PK penalty shootout result against Malta and Brazil in the bottom half. So again, a North American semifinal this weekend. And on the top side, Sweden and Australia. Big group action from those three that we've seen in group play happening this weekend. And then on the 6th, of course, the final. This will be talked about on the Attacking Third podcast, the newest edition of the CBS Sports Podcast family. Co-host Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman. Download and follow. They'll be talking about that and then getting you ready for the semifinals ahead.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.